Well, good day to everyone joining us, and welcome to today's X Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled Patient-Centric Brand Growth with ChatGPT, Predictive AI and On-Demand Patient Journey. My name is Ryan Muse, and I'll be your X Talks host for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and this presentation includes a Q&A session with our speakers. Now, the webinar is designed to be interactive, and webinars work best when you're involved. So please feel free to submit your questions and comments for our speakers throughout the presentation using the questions chat box, and we'll try to attend to your questions during the Q&A session. This chat box is located in the control panel, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you require any assistance along the way, you can contact me at any time by sending a message using the same chat panel. At this time, know that all participants are in listen-only mode, and please note that the event will be recorded and made available for streaming on xtalks.com. At this point, I'd like to thank Prospection, who developed the content for this presentation. Prospection, a leader in healthcare data analytic technology, strives to advance precision medicine using real-world evidence. By applying cutting-edge machine learning algorithms to analyze longitudinal data for hundreds of millions of patients, Prospection uncovers insights about health journeys and treatment patterns beyond clinical trials. This actionable evidence is aimed at achieving better patient outcomes globally. Now I would like to introduce our speakers for today's event. Eric Chung, co-founder at Prospection, is a leader in the life science industry with a focus on real-world evidence and patient-level data. With 20 years of experience in business consulting, startup management, and data analytics across various industries, Eric's expertise contributes to better business decisions and enhanced health outcomes. Nathan Walters serves as Prospection's ANZ General Manager and with over 20 years of experience in the pharmaceutical sector, specializing in market access and HEOR. Formerly Janssen Pharmaceuticals Vice President Market Access Asia Pacific, Nathan has a strong background in policy development, payer modeling, and real-world evidence generation. Kirsten Mann has 25 years career in the tech industry, specializing in product management, user experience, and product development. With a focus on creating customer-oriented solutions, she has built global teams, led the creation of award-winning products, and achieved significant commercial outcomes. And Lindsay Carberg has almost 20 years of experience in marketing and digital innovation for global health, life sciences, and digital health organizations, including 4 successful startups. Lindsay, prior to roles, include Vice President of Marketing at Verana Health and various roles at AbbVie, where she led global digital marketing for Cool Sculpture and served as Vice President of Digital Strategy and Innovation. Now, without further ado, though, let's go ahead and hand things over to our first speaker for today. Lindsay Carberg, you may begin when you're ready.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Ryan. It is an absolute pleasure to welcome all of you on the call today. In this webinar, we'll be exploring the convergence between AI, patient-centric intelligence, and the evolving world of pharma brand management. Our objective is to plant the seeds of motivation to help you take that next step on your AI journey or your patient-centric intelligence journey. And today, it's understanding patient journeys in seconds. Tomorrow, it's predicting outcomes based on patient journey pathways. And with the advent and massive adoption of ChatGPT, I know it's drastically improved my personal productivity. There is now a new way of interacting with data, thinking about the data, extracting insights from the data on demand. Before we get into the perspectives of our esteemed panelists on ChatGPT, predictive AI, and everything in between, I'd like to anchor you a bit on who Prospection is and why we're excited to share our thoughts on this provocative topics. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen to get us started. All right. Well, I wanted to start out by painting a picture of the state of today for drug commercialization. I know that many of you are directly involved with commercial success and others have more of an indirect impact. No matter your role, it's important to understand that just over 1/3 of drug launches fail. And according to the Deloitte study, nearly half of those failures can be attributed to a lack of understanding of patients and providers, a lack of understanding around care dynamics. This is not just a drug launch problem. Over our 10 years of partnering with pharma, we've seen this problem persist through the drug's commercialization life cycle. We call it care and share leak. Without a clear understanding of the patient care journey, market share opportunities are lost or just wholly missed. Without that clear understanding, there's billions of dollars left on the table, and most notably, 40% of patients not receiving care that's aligned with evidence-based guidelines. We often find that our customers know that there is care and share leak in their brand, but really have a hard time articulating what is costing them, and more importantly, what's costing their patients. And often, they really only address this problem during brand planning. That's where Prospection comes in. We solve for this care and share leak in real time through patient-centric intelligence. We illuminate care's impact on market share through powerful proprietary engine supported by clinical and analytics expertise. Now, I mentioned that Prospection powers patient-centric intelligence with the aim to address care and share leak for pharma brands. We've been doing this for more than a decade, so our pharma partners consider us deep experts in this realm, and you'll get a flavor of that as you hear from our panelists. And over those 10 years, we've built this proprietary advanced engine at the core of everything we do. This includes powering contemporary products and AI offerings, including ChatGPT, launching this year, which we'll give you a sneak preview of. Now, I mentioned that we've been doing this for 10 years, but it's also worth noting that we've partnered with more than 100 pharma companies to unlock the power of patient-centric intelligence. Also, over the course of that time, we've worked in more than 20 therapeutic areas and 100 clinical indications, and more than 2,000 brands and treatments. This has all been to support and guide product launches, commercial strategy, brand planning, and brand growth. Also, over those 10 years, we've built this massive knowledge engine that we call our patient-centric intelligence core. This tech-first engine is purpose-built. It transforms transactional real-world data into patient journeys at scale, hundreds of millions in fact, and this is all in real time and with very deep clinical nuance, including lines of therapies and regimens. Our PCI, patient-centric intelligence core, processes 80 billion clinical events and can produce insights in seconds to illuminate patient care's impact on market share. This PCI core engine is the engine, but our Prospection platform is the car, right? It is what our customers drive daily. They log into daily. They get on-demand patient-centric insights. Our platform is data agnostic. It's flexible. It's intelligent. It brings fast and easy access to a range of offerings that help commercial, medical, and analytics teams understand that patient care's impact on market share. And we see this helping to shape brand strategy, tactical execution, and everything in between. The out-of-the-box products on the Prospection platform are 3. Insight to guide brand strategy, and that means tracking your patient-centric leading indicators. And this includes patients on treatment, initiation, switches, continuations, et cetera, et cetera. The second is Journey, which helps you get that full view of very complex patient journeys on demand and help you understand market share, including at different lines of therapy. And the last is action. This is a tactical execution based on patient and provider behavior triggers. We also offer a direct access solution to select harmonized and enriched data sets. And we partner with many pharma companies on projects and innovation, particularly, and very hot right now, our AI roadmaps. And that brings me to one of our final slides around AI innovation. So for AI, we're rapidly pacing toward a world of predictive and prescriptive analytics, where many of our customers aspire to be within as soon as the next 3 years. Today, our platform gives on-demand understanding of what has happened just around the corner. It will give an understanding of why it happened, and we're building to the beyond, which is a hot topic for today. Now, as we open up the webinar to the panelists, I'll close by saying that patient centricity is in the Prospection DNA. As we look to AI advancements, this is the lens we take and how we look to partner with pharma to ultimately get the right patients on the right treatment at the right time. And now that you have a little background on Prospection and our journey toward AI innovation, let's kick it off to the panelists. Eric, Kirsten, Nathan, thank you for taking the time to share your perspectives today. To kick things off, we'll do a little softball. So could each of you give a little bit of an elevator pitch on your background and tell the audience why you're most excited about AI innovations and what's to come? So Eric, I'll start with you.
Hi everyone. My background is technical actually. So I have a engineering background, and 20 plus years ago I was programming robots to play soccer. And then I've moved on since then, and I've worked in a few industries, including the life sciences industry for the last 10 years or so. What's exciting me now is the ability to sort of take some of the things that I've seen across other industries in what they've done in advanced analytics and AI and bring that to the life sciences industry. And if I were to call out one in particular, Lindsay, you mentioned those patient journeys. So what this is exciting me is we now realistically, practically see a path to achieving predictive patient journeys at an individual level for hundreds of millions of patients. So we've been able to do this in the past by one disease at a time, where, to give an example, we would work with specialists in prostate cancer and build predictive models for one disease to look at how those patients progress. I think what's exciting me most now is, with a leap forward in AI and what we've seen, the ability to do that at scale for hundreds of millions of patients across the world for many diseases. So rather than one disease and having to hand code each of these, the ability to generalize this to predict progression for like most of the diseases that we see for individuals at scale in the hundreds of millions practically. That is one thing that's exciting me.
Well, thanks, Eric. Kirsten, where do you see the opportunity?
Well, thanks, Lindsay. I've been creating software and designing end-to-end customer experiences for over 25 years. So I've seen all sorts of technology being introduced in that time, including the internet and mobile apps. My daughter tells me I'm very old when I tell her I was around before the internet. And what's really exciting about the latest innovations in AI, it's things like it's taking mundane tasks away from people, but they're also helping to distill information. And we're hearing terms a lot like democratization of data. I think we're going to be sick of that term probably in a couple of years' time, but it's really true. And in our case, with data and insights, we're seeing AI tech like GPT enabling people to interact with data like never before, which means they're starting to actually see the true value being realized from all of this data that we've been drowning in for so long. So for Prospection, this means we help customers understand how our patients can be treated more effectively and potentially, as Eric said, predict individual patient journeys. And so that is super exciting. So that's one of the things for me anyway, Lindsay.
All right, thanks, Kirsten. I agree. It's exciting to think about where we'll be in 3 to 5 years. Nathan, I'm going to have you bring it home.
Thanks, Lindsay, and hi, everyone. As you heard at the start, my background's pharma, so 20 years in the pharma industry, and specifically in market access, so working closely with commercial and medical teams to bring new medicines to market across Asia Pacific. So I'm going to come at it from that lens. The thing that excites me most around AI is its potential impact on healthcare. And really, in terms of our ability to make faster and better decisions that are going to improve patient outcomes and the performance of our businesses.
Nathan, could we dig a little deeper on that? What has been challenging within pharma stores with decision making? I imagine you experienced this firsthand with your background. How have you seen the role of data evolve over the years?
Yeah, I think it links back to that I think it was the last slide you showed, the path to AI innovation, and that descriptive analytics through diagnostic to predictive and then prescriptive. I've been around long enough in industry to remember a time when we struggled, not only in pharma, but life sciences in general, to have access to any data outside of a clinical trial on how drugs were performing in the real world, let alone the analysis that would go with that to create insights that you could use in a meaningful or a timely way. And I think that we then entered the era, everyone would call the era, then it was big data and real world evidence and real world data, And that's when there was the realization that we're sitting on quite a lot of data out there that was growing over time that gives us insights around how patients are going on medicines. And so there was a mad scramble to access that data, to capture that data, to understand how to use it, and all the analytics that then sort of sped up in terms of allowing us to understand and gain the insights around that data. And that's really where the history of prospection came from, around going from that static analysis to, insights at scale, analysis at scale, that really allowed us to start understanding what was going on in the real world. So that's that descriptive phase we're talking about. And I think as part of that journey in that descriptive phase, you mentioned earlier around patient-centric intelligence or patient-centric insights. We've seen a shift really towards that, really relying on more patient-centric insights that's derived around the journey of the patient through the healthcare system and their own journey through diseases, to understand impact on outcomes, but also the impact on businesses. And where that might have been in the realms of medical teams in the past, you're seeing it more and more driving commercial decisions around how best to deploy resources and understand how to better inform and provide better outcomes to patients. So that's kind of where we're at right now, in huge volumes of descriptive analysis. And I suppose what the problem we've got now, we see across many of our customers, is what do I do with those insights? We're now drowning under a mountain of insights. And how do I find the most important insights, the ones that matter, where we can intervene to improve outcomes? So moving into that diagnostic phase of how do I diagnose what impacts and trends are going to have the most impact? So where we might be doing that in businesses like ours, but also business intelligence and data analytics teams and pharma companies, are sifting through those mountains of insights to try and identify the most important. I think the exciting thing we're right on the cusp of, and I think Kirsten is going to show a bit of a demo later, is how we can use AI to do exactly that, to take away the manual side of it, of sifting through those insights, to find those insights that matter. And I think that's really exciting. But I don't think we're going to stay there for very long, because the minute you start deriving those insights that matter, it's around what do you do next. And Eric mentioned predictive. As our insights have improved, so is the data. We've got genetic data, biomarkers. It's only going to allow us to predict what happens next. So we move very quickly into that predictive phase and onto prescriptive, where now that I know what's going to happen next, or suspect what's going to happen next, what do I do next? What do I do next as a pharma company? What do I do next as a doctor or as a patient? So I think that's kind of the path that we're taking, and where the decision making is going to only get better through the introduction of AI.
Thanks, Nathan. It's helpful to understand and have you explain in your own words. Today it's descriptive, the what happened. We're in the realm of getting to diagnostic, the why it happened, and then moving into this realm of predictive analytics, which is going to be here sooner than we know it. It'd be helpful, Eric, if you could touch a bit about it, upon this. What data and technology advances in AI and machine learning are getting us to this progression towards diagnostic and predictive analytics?
Yeah, sure, I can. So I'll marry that technology and data journey with some of the things that Nathan talked about. So we were quite fortunate to start in Australia, actually. So Prospection was Australian sort of headquartered, but we have now expanded across the world into Japan and into the US and some other markets. But starting in Australia on this data and technology journey was quite nice, because Australia is a single payer, universal healthcare data system, healthcare system. So when we worked with the government originally in Australia, we were able to get access to data that was clean, complete, longitudinal, representative of the whole country, that we could track individual patients for 17 years when we started. So you can see the progression of these patients over time. And at the time, cloud computing had started, and that's some of the progression that we'd seen in a lot of that technology power. And so what Prospection was able to do in that first realm of going from static to that descriptive interactive analytics world was to take all that data and pull out all the events that matter. So, so for each patient, we looked at each patient one by one to pull out the things that matter to that patient. So if I were to talk about a prostate cancer patient, we'd be pulling out all the key events in that patient's life in their treatment journey. So when they were first diagnosed, did they have radiation? What key doctors did they see? What were their first medications? And then did they go into a surgery? What happened to that patient next in this journey? And so really that backed up what we called that patient-centric intelligence core. That's the asset that we've built to be able to take each patient, pull out all the individual key elements in that patient's life that matters to their care or matters to sort of market share decisions, and then analyze that according to guidelines. Then you asked Lindsay a little bit of what's happened since then. So as AI, technology, data has increased, we were fortunate to start in Australia with something clean, complete, and longitudinal. Then around the world, there's been an expansion in availability and access to data. What started off as a 3 million patient data set has now become more than 500 million patients from around the world, where we then take all those patients and are able to process that through that same core to pull out the key events in this patient's life. Then at the same time, you've seen technology advance. So beyond the cloud computing and the SaaS infrastructure, then you've had Amazon and sort of online computing come up to give you more processing power, which now means that we can, from a technology point of view, unlock some of those things that Nathan talked about. And so what went from static to dynamic got to the point probably again where it became too dynamic, and we had every permutation of patients. We could cut patients up into young, old, sick, comorbid, not comorbid. The ones that mattered were the ones that matched guideline, didn't match guideline, had adverse events, had remission, didn't have remission. Like there were so many permutations that we could now cut and see answers for at real time. And we found all of that information very useful in the diagnosis of patients' care. And so we tried to make more and more of that available. And then got to the point that actually the tool that we used you had a screenshot earlier to show all this data, again became something that a powered user needed to make. So if we talked about the PCI core, the patient-centric intelligence core being the engine, then our platforms and our tools being the car got so powerful that it was almost like an F1 car. You need to be an F1 driver, power user, BI person with a steering wheel with 50 buttons on it to sort of know how to actually get the best out of this car and this engine that can powerfully process through all these patients. And so the next innovation frontier now is how do you take that F1 steering wheel and this driver that needs to be super used and make that simpler? How do you make it so that you can just ask it natural language questions like you can with ChatGPT and it pulls up the answer? So it still leverages on what we had built on that PCI, patient-centric intelligence core that we built that pulls out the key regimens, the remission periods, the outcomes, the segmentation of that patient, and allows you to ask questions so that you can ask questions today as like show me triple therapy patients that are having adverse events, and it'll pull up an answer and you can interact with it naturally. That's what I see as sort of coming with, available now and then enabled now with how technology is evolving. And I only see this getting better, like as if patient counts went from 3 million to 500 million, like that's going to now get bigger and bigger. And with that, then more and more power to actually analyze this. And so coming forward with this AI is almost, I've started this analogy of a car, so I'm going to keep going with it. Then how do you get to autopilot? How do you get to autopilot that you can more easily navigate, put in your GPS location of where you want to go and have it go there? So that's a little bit of the evolution that I've seen over time.
Thanks, Eric. I think it's exciting. Kirsten, I'm going to pass it to you because when I think of ChatGPT, I think of what are synonyms for this word? Can you please write me a job description for this? And my rudimentary use of ChatGPT doesn't do justice to what we're talking about, I think. So could you really explain kind of what the ChatGPT powered functionality is and what you could do with that?
So thanks, Lizzie. Well, I think everyone on this webinar is well aware that healthcare data is complex. And as Eric mentioned, at Prospection, we've harnessed over a decade of experience from working over 120 conditions and using that data on over 500 million patients on this PCI engine that both yourself and Eric mentioned. And essentially what we've done with GPT, so exactly as you said, Lindsay, most people used to give me a role description or tell me how to say this. We've harnessed that technology and the natural language processing to create a friendly user experience. And this broadens access to patient-centric insights as it acts as this bridge where it's translating the complex data patterns that Eric mentioned, which are generated by Prospection's PCI engine, into understandable narratives. So GPT utilizes the unique language of healthcare and enables our customers to interact with data through intuitive conversations, and they can explore things like patient journeys, understand prescriber behaviour, decipher market dynamics. And so it means that data can actually evolve from being this repository of valuable but untapped information. Nathan mentioned how pharma companies are tending to drown in data. It turns this from just sitting there into this really potent tool for strategic decision making by anyone in an organisation. So patient-centric intelligence becomes more actionable. It simplifies the uplift of care and share and ultimately aligns patient well-being and commercial success. And that's all within our platform. So that's what's really exciting about this.
Yeah, that's exciting. I read an article today that said, don't show up to the gold rush without a shovel. And it seems like GPT is the shovel of the data era. Ryan, I think we have a poll on ChatGPT. So before we kick it back to Kirsten to do a bit of a demo, it'd be helpful to pop that up and kind of get feedback from the attendees here.
Yes, indeed. So appearing on everyone's screen right now is a polling question, and you can participate by selecting on any of the answers that you see in front of you and then clicking submit. The question that we're asking is GPT-powered technology being used in your organization today? Your answer options are a yes or a no. We'll give everyone some time to consider your answer. Select one, as I said, and click submit to participate and register your answer to the question of, again, is ChatGPT-powered technology being used in your organization today? It looks like most of you have submitted your answer. Thank you very much for participating. Let's look at where your results have come down. We have 63% of you selecting yes, and then 38% for no. So thank you again for participating, and I'll hand it back to you.
Oh, thanks, Ryan. Actually, interesting mix. I would have thought more are using GPT. From what I've heard from the grapevine is a lot of companies are experimenting with GPT for IT internally and internal use. So it's interesting to see the mix, and thank you all for being here to kind of learn more about the power of it. So Kirsten, I'll kick it back to you to show us what the ChatGPT looks like in the context of patient-centric intelligence.
Well, and thanks, Lindsay. I love to, because this all sounds really interesting, right? Like, you really don't see the full power of this until you interact with our platform. And so I'm going to give you a quick preview today on what we're doing with GPT. Now, I am using a video for smoothness, so I'm not being beholden to the internet gods, but I wanted to highlight that all of this is real, and we're able to do live demos, and we even have a freemium option so people can play and see these capabilities for themselves. And so what you're seeing on my screen at the moment is one of the home pages of our Prospection platform. The car, as Lindsay called it, and we've got the PCI engine driving this from behind. And here we've structured the most common business questions that we hear from our pharma and life science customers. And this leads into dashboards across our various product offerings. So if in this case, if we're seeing some of the various dashboards available, and if I look at market share in the targeted patient populations, I'm taken to the Market Insights module where I can see patients on treatment dashboard. And I'll just pause there for a sec. And just what you're seeing for this demo, you can see at the top, we're looking at HER2 positive metastatic breast cancer. And of course, our engine powers all types of subtypes of breast cancer. And we've got lots of, as I mentioned earlier, we cover 102 therapy areas, so all sorts of oncology and things as well. But I wanted to show something that we've noticed that is specific to this subgroup. Now you can see the patients in the market being treated by various individual drugs or regimens. And you'll also see there's lots of ways to view this enriched data through the filters that Eric mentioned before. And so you can, all sorts of permutations, but this can be pretty overwhelming to new users, right? And this is where the power of something like ChatGPT comes in. And because our value prop is really around understanding patient care to ultimately drive patient share. So when we look at this and we see an example with GPT, and so I've just pulled up the window in the video, you can see here too that if people, part of anybody who's used forms of this, part of it is also the questioning and things too. And sometimes people go, where do I start? How do I interact with this? So there we've shown type of example questions to get people going. But really in this case, we might be saying, how many patients have experienced an adverse event within 3 months of taking a triple therapy, like what Eric was mentioning before, and view this adverse event as well. So you'll see here the power of video and us typing very quickly now. Of course, using GPT, you can have spelling mistakes, and it's really what it's doing is all of this data has been structured behind, and as you can see, all the filters earlier, it's all there. This is just really driving it in a language intuitive way. And so what we're seeing here is all the patients in the market versus the ones on triple therapy with adverse events. And something that's really interesting here is this, explain how you did that, right? So let's just generate that, and I'll pause for a moment, because this is really a pivotal aspect and one of our foundational principles behind AI, focused on transparency, or what's becoming known in industry as XAI, meaning explainable AI. And as I mentioned earlier, we're essentially using with the way, or one of the things that we've done with implementing GPT is enabling natural language to drive this structured data and insights. We want to also demystify the findings and remove that black box that typically surrounds AI and allow people to clarify how they've derived the answer that they're actually seeing. So this is really one of the key differentiators in the way that we've implemented GPT versus what we're seeing is happening in industry, in internal teams, which are trialing using GPT on their own internal dashboards and data, but aren't necessarily thinking of these sorts of key principles like transparency. You want everybody understanding, how did you derive this answer? And so I'm not just thinking, is this right? Is this wrong? What's really happened here? So in this case, if I'm interested now in seeing the patient journey leading to triple therapy, I'd actually then go and enter that in GPT, and we're going to be automatically navigated to the patient journey. And so here we can see the patient journey. This is triple therapy is pretty much exclusively used in first-line treatment. So this wouldn't be totally surprising what we've seen here. Now, previously, when we were looking at patients being treated with certain regimens at certain lines and the adverse effects, this sort of information, we might start to narrow in on the patients experiencing those adverse events and start actually targeting the doctor that's treating them. So it's back to our patient care link. And we previously saw one of the adverse events that some of the patients had developed in the previous screens that I showed around patient on treatment was interstitial pneumonia, or IP, where a patient can develop this after their immune system and lungs are weakened from cancer treatments. So let's take a closer look at those patients and hear the power of video. We're typing very quickly, entering that question. And so we're basically seeing the patients who've developed IP after triple drug therapy. And we can see those patients here. Thankfully, there's not too many, which isn't surprising as it's a rare condition. But what we're seeing here, I'll just pause for a moment, is the doctors that are treating those patients. And what we can do now is actually click on any of those doctors, and in this case, Dr. Sydney Song. And we can see here that they've been treating this patient this past year. And so when we're thinking about patient care and impact of adverse events like IP from triple therapy and the market share impacts, you can tactically use this adverse event to start targeting doctors treating these patients, which also helps our pharma customers maintain or win market share. So I've just given a whirlwind tour of our platform. As I said, Lindsay, we're happy to do one-on-one demos or let people loose on this and play for themselves. You can register via our website to do so.
Thank you so much, Kirsten. I think we just got a little teeny flavor of the power of the GPT. So like Kirsten said, if you want to play around with it or get more in depth, we're happy to chat. But I want to now pivot back to Nathan. And in the context of, we've got ChatGPT in the back of our minds, and you talked about decision-making earlier. How do you see this transforming the way that pharma does business and makes decisions?
Thanks, Lindsay. I mentioned before that the problem now is wading through those insights to find the ones that matter so that teams can, intervene to improve patient outcomes. And the medical and commercial teams that are responsible for doing this often don't have the time or the analytics capability to sift through kind of what Kirsten was showing there to find those insights that matter. And so it's fallen often to business intelligence teams and data analytics teams or companies like ours to help support them and guide them in diagnosing what's the right thing to do. I think what it's going to do is, and Kirsten used the term, so I'm going to use it again, democratize the data and the insights back into the hands of the people making the decisions on what to do next. And that's not making redundant the role of other teams. I think what it does is free up teams like the business intelligence and data analytics to answer the more complex problems. We're constantly building on from data to simple insights to more complex insights that can only speed up our ability to intervene and improve outcomes. So I think it's going to allow the next wave of innovation where those teams can then focus on solving those more complex problems while the commercial medical teams get into action and action those insights and really get us on that journey to the predictive and the prescriptive, where it's really going to make a difference in the future.
Great, thank you. I have a sneak peek of some of the questions that are coming in, and some of them are around prescriptive analytics. And I think, Eric, maybe this is a good segue to you because you've painted the vision of the future. Could you talk us through where you see it going next? How close are we? What is it? It would be great to get your perspective there.
A little bit about the next steps from here, right? So Kirsten demoed what's available today. So this is a feature that we're just releasing. People can play with this now. It is using ChatGPT as a text interface to get to the data. So you can ask it natural questions, make it easy, have it available to everybody to answer those questions. From here, what happens? The next feature that's being released is that diagnostic. So then how do you go through all the permutations of these patients and just highlight to the end user, the pharma executive, which patients are actually making the biggest difference? What are the trends that are mattering? And how much of an impact does that make to your business? That's the next thing that's just around the corner as to what happens from here. Now, we use ChatGPT for those because it's familiar. It is natural. It is what everybody is using. But and those are the first couple of releases. The releases of ChatGPT is just a way to ask questions to get to the data. If you ask what we were doing prescriptively and what's predictive, then behind the scenes we are training LLM models. We are training base models with the 500 million patients that we have to create something that is similar to ChatGPT, so uses the same underlying technologies, but is trained on all the patients. After training it on all the patients, then this is where we're doing individual predictions for each of the patients to know what would happen to those patients. And then your question on the prescriptive, we're taking the area that we're focusing on is prescribing what is the right action to take on that patient. So that mantra of the right treatment for the right patient at the right time. After training or an LLM with all these patients, then making a prediction of each of these patients, then the prescriptive action that we're taking is what's going to happen to this patient, what treatment actually maximizes the outcome for this patient, and then how to flag these patients first with pharma companies, but we know that this is valuable across the board. It will be valuable for pharma, it will be valuable for payer, and it will be valuable for the end physician. So the prescriptive action that we're taking is integrating that back into the physician software to give that physician the right decision support. And those are some of the pilots that we have going with some of our innovation partners now as to how to then take that prescriptive part on the treatment for the patient that maximizes that patient's outcome and hence leans into where we're focusing on in terms of our business benefit of what you talked before about the care and share leak. How do you find those patients that are not getting the most optimal care, have that decision support as to what is right for this patient, and use that to help pharma companies increase their patient share? That's the prescriptive area that Prospection is focusing on.
Great. Thanks, Eric. Eric, I'm going to ask you to do a double click as well, because I realize our attendees may have varying levels of knowledge around LLM. Maybe could you explain what that term is, what it stands for, in just a 10-second description of it?
Yep. So 10-second description is, I'll continue with an analogy. So the ChatGPT and like one is, it's being trained on reading lots and lots and lots of text. And it's read a lot of this text, which like I would refer to that as a large language model, to create this model that then you can write it a sentence and then it can write out the rest of that sentence. So similar to that, we've created a base model that's been trained on lots and lots and lots of patients. So hundreds of millions of patients. And then in that text, instead of the words of the sentences, the equivalent for us is we've trained it on all the events in that patient's life. So what happened to that patient over the last 17 years? That would be the words in the text that we've trained it on. That's the equivalent for Prospection. So that for each patient, when you see that sequence of events in that patient's life, so like a sentence, like a sequence of words, it would then extend that out to say what happens to this patient next. So we're using the underlying technology. The acronym LLM is a large language model, but fundamentally underneath the scenes, it's a very large neural network. We're using that neural network, training it on many, many patients so that it learns to predict out what will happen to each of these patients. That's the core, like if I gave a description of the underlying technology. And then how we're using that now is then in these predictive patient journeys so that we can do prescriptive analytics as to what is the best course of treatment for this patient.
All right, thank you so much. I think it's inspiring to hear about where we're going in the future. I see we have questions coming in, the Q&A. Before we get to the Q&A, let's wrap up the panel with a roundtable question. So I'm going to ask you each to comment on what pharma companies need to be doing today to make sure they don't fall behind the AI train tomorrow. So Eric, since you have the floor, let's start with you.
I think pharma companies today are already working on these type of things, being conscious of collecting the right data and interpreting that data and starting to know what's in it and using that to power some of their decisions. Because what will end up happening is in a couple of years' time, they'll like the models are trained on the data from today, and those models will be making recommendations to the doctors of what treatments to take in the future. So that's a little bit of the path that is about to unfold. And what's core today is how do you prepare for that?
All right, thanks, Eric. Kirsten, what are your thoughts?
Well, obviously, I'm for the insights are for everyone camp. So I think AI is reducing the barrier to entry to becoming a data-driven culture. And we're finding that the early adopters that we're co-designing this with and are really putting the power of this in the hands of everyone in their teams. So they're wanting everyone to benefit from data and use AI to understand and put patient outcomes at the center of everything they do. So for me, I'd encourage everybody to jump in because this is a pretty exciting time. And exactly as the examples that Eric mentioned and has been going through and you saw the demo, this is all real. We can do this now, right? So this is the time to start utilizing it and making the most of that opportunity.
All right, thanks, Kirsten. Nathan, I'll ask you to close us out.
Mine's a bit related to Kirsten's. I think it's about just getting started now. AI is we're only at the start of it. It's only going to continue to accelerate. It doesn't seem that long ago since ChatGPT was introduced, and it really wasn't. And so where it's going and what it's going to do, those early adopters getting on the path, it's really important that everyone's thinking that way, and we really look forward to working with them in taking it forward on that innovation path.
Great. Well, thank you all for such great insight into AI, patient-centric intelligence, ChatGPT. So let's open up the floor. If you have any questions for our panelists, please enter them into the chat. Also, as a reminder, our team is happy to meet one-on-one to discuss your AI, patient-centric intelligence journey and needs. So feel free to send us an email. Our emails will be posted here soon, or you don't hesitate to reach out to any of us on LinkedIn as well. So Ryan, I will kick it over to you to moderate the questions coming through.
Yes, thank you very much, all of you, for that very insightful discussion. I would like to invite the audience to keep sending their questions or comments right now using the questions window for this Q&A portion of our webinar. I've already received some questions, so let's get started with those. The very first question that I have for you would just like to know, what is your unique value proposition on the path to prescriptive GPT? I think maybe this could be directed towards Eric to comment first.
Yep. So part of what is unique about Prospection is how we've captured all our learnings into our patient-centric intelligence core. That is now an asset that we've been able to use across multiple countries. For that core, we've been building treatment-specific algorithms. So one's for breast cancer, one's for lung cancer, one's for multiple myeloma. Then in each of those, how do you pull out the key treatment guideline regimens? So what was the regimen, what was done at line 1, what was done at line 2, what was done at line 3? With that core, we've now and then been able to take in data from multiple countries and extract that same insight from those patients from multiple countries. We've generalized that. So we may have started in Australia, but now we have access to many data sets. We've become data agnostic, and what we're looking at in those patients is not just how do you look at claims data, how do you look at, which is essentially, claims data is essentially financial reimbursements, right? How do you take that financial reimbursement data, convert it into something that clinically is meaningful and makes sense, that can be compared against sort of treatment guidelines and thought about how a doctor thinks about it. That's what's unique about Prospection.
That's very good. All right, thank you for that. Now, I think you may have already touched on this next question a little bit, but I'll ask it anyway in case you'd like to comment further on it. This person says that knowing that not all the LLMs are created equal, what was your rationale for selecting ChatGPT, particularly when it came to prescriptive analytics?
The ChatGPT functionality is only our first version. So as they talked about, not all models are created equal. We're using several of them. The first one with ChatGPT that we're releasing has been selected, one, because it's quite familiar to people. It's familiar, it was easy to integrate to, the APIs are available. And what we're doing with that is we're also even managing security. We're not giving it any of this private patient data, which should be held quite secure. We're able to only give it instructions on how to navigate our dashboard. And so what we've been able to, why we selected ChatGPT is we used it to train it to be able to pull the insights out of our dashboard in a way that you can interact with it in a natural language format. So that's the key use there. Behind the scenes, it's still our patient-centric intelligence core pulling up all the right data, which also enabled us to keep that data private. So how to keep, because this is all, personalized people's data that we wanted to keep private. We used and manage all the security considerations. We use ChatGPT to control our dashboard and know how to navigate. Then the other models that people were referring to, we are using those internally to Prospection, where we can control privacy and what's been put into these models.
All right, thank you so much for that. I wonder if you can share what are some of the key criteria to select these kinds of platforms.
I interpret that question as selecting platforms like Prospections. So what are some of the key criteria to selecting Prospections like ours? I think part of our approach is also how we integrate. And what I mean by that is we're not forcing people to use only our platform. We have our platform, which has been made for speed, for convenience, for ease of use, for usability, for speed to get up and running, and that it presents a dashboard that you can ask right now natural language questions to pull up data, and then next descriptive information. But I think what is key in selecting platforms like Prospection is interoperability. What we are doing is our patient-centric intelligence engine that powers this, we're also making that available to integrate directly into each company's other systems. So if you have other data warehouses, if you have other data intelligence tools, if you have other programs you're trying to do with it, we also integrate to those. So I think one thing that we've been putting forward is not making it such a hard black and white decision to pick a platform that is a closed environment. We've enabled people to have the best of both, where they can use our platform for speed and get up and running straight away, but still kind of have their cake and eat it too, and get output from the intelligence that we've added, some of those competitive differences and unique value propositions that I talked about before, and plumb that into the rest of each company's ecosystems and other things they want to do with it.
Right, okay. And Kirsten, I wonder if maybe you might have a unique perspective on this to share as well.
And well, I think in terms of what Eric was outlining there, I don't know if I've got a lot to add except that the key really is finding something that's supporting the use cases that you're trying to do. Okay, too. So sometimes, and that actually does it. So I see a lot of different products in industry saying that they could do this or do that and things, and then it's the surface. So every product talks about patient journeys, but can you really get down to the specific line and see how the patients are being diagnosed, the drugs they're using, how they're being treated, switch that to the next line and do that all dynamically? Those type of things are really important when you're trying to look at individual patient care. So they're the kind of things I'd be saying, is the platform supporting our use cases, but at a detailed level as well, not just at a surface level.
There's
All right.
something just to add, just to emphasize, is that again, we span multiple countries. With the platforms are being developed to be agnostic to that, so it standardizes the approach to getting those insights in a way that's useful across globally. So any data set you bring, we can do the same thing. We're only limited by the data you put in it.
All right, thank you. Now, Kirsten, as the CPO, I wonder, do you see your product disappearing and just becoming a search box where we could just write our questions and we get answers out?
Well, I love this question, by the way, so thank you. It's from a product perspective, it's always about supporting the job to be done. So if that is really ultimately people are trying to get the information to this question, then that's the experience that we would facilitate. And there's lots of examples like this. The product is just not that search box, obviously, as Lindsay and Eric have talked about. The product is the whole end-to-end patient intelligence core. And so at this front end is you're seeing the car that you're driving, but we've obviously got the engine, we've got the back of it all setting up. That's the full product experience. But in terms of what that then is seen by the user, for example, I've worked on a product previously where the metric was initially, let's see how many people are logging in. And I was like, well, from an experience point of view, do people need to log in? Could they just get this information from their email? Let's think about what people are trying to do. So ultimately, if people need to just be able to search to get that information, and that's the key experience we need to support, and that's what you see at a front end of the product, I'm okay with that.
All right, very good, thank you. I've got another question here for you, Eric, wondering, considering Prospection represents 10% of the data, are the the treater details representative of the universe?
I assume that data is talking about our original genesis of Australia, 10%. So Prospection has a lot more data than that now. Prospection has data from multiple countries, from governments, from hospitals, from insurance companies. So there's a representation across all of the countries. All of that is available through our platform. So to that question of is what happens to 10% and is it representative of all, we actually then do use data from multiple countries to train our models. So we are making this available across many data sets. Lindsay also mentioned is, like right at the very beginning, Prospection is data agnostic. So we do collect this data from multiple countries, but we've also seen the way that we work with our partners is they end up giving us their data. So they'll give us their data as well, and we'll add that to actually the analytics so that the platform that we build is available to be run across all of that. And we'd like to think of how we can work with each of our companies as partners, as commercial and innovation partners, to be able to build this out together.
Now, Eric, regarding predictive AI, the example that you mentioned about identifying the best treatment path, would pharma businesses no longer be required? Could doctors, payers, and governments use this approach directly without the need for commercial organizations?
I mean, I think there's a roadmap to get there. Pharma companies will always be required. One, they're the ones that are building the drugs, and developing those drugs. Then when it comes out, you first then need to educate the medical community about these. With these predictive analytics tools, they still require the right evidence to be produced. So there is still the aspect of how do you produce the right evidence for these outcomes? Then how do you then leverage that evidence that's being produced to then guide these treatment recommendations? So although I do see a world where pharma companies, insurers, doctors, governments are all using this, there is still a key role for pharma companies absolutely to play. Is these tools make things easier for people, but they don't actually take away the core necessity. Is what I would think.
That's great. Thank you so much for that answer, all of you, for all of your answers. However, we have reached the end of the Q&A portion of our webinar. If we couldn't attend to your questions, the team at Prospection will follow up with you, or if you have further questions, you can direct them to the email addresses that are up on the screen. I want to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar. You will be receiving a follow-up email from XTalks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screen as you exit, and your participation is appreciated as it helps us to improve our webinars. Additionally, there is a link in the chat to view the recording of this event, which you can also share with your colleagues so they may register for the recording here as well. So I encourage you to do that. Now, please join me once more in thanking our speakers for their wonderful time here today. We hope everyone found the webinar informative. Have a great day, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.